morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're watching this presentation. My name is Greg Roush with Purina Animal Nutrition, and this is...
I'm Janessa Parker with VSI.
And thank you for Grange Co-op for hosting us to do this presentation for you folks today. We are now into 2021 chick season. Also want to let you know, unfortunately, we're coming via tape. Because we are following COVID protocol, we decided to do a virtual poultry owners workshop this year for your benefit. We are doing this for your education. If you have any questions as you are viewing this or afterwards, please go to your local Grange Co-op store and they can answer any further questions you may have. So without further ado, we will get going. I'm going to start the presentation this morning. We're going to focus on management of the poultry. Various types. Management will be the same as we go through here, no matter what type of poultry you are raising, but there are some nutritional differences as we go through. We're also going to talk about some health aspects to be concerned about, and there'll be certain times that Janessa will come up here and talk about various things, and sometimes that I will be talking to you. So, why do we raise chickens? When I was a kid, we raised chickens primarily for egg production and for meat production. Today is really no different than it has been for the last 30, 40, 50, 100 years. The primary reason you folks are probably going to be getting chickens is for either eggs or meat. And there again, the management will be the same on these, but there will be some nutritional differences based on what you want to raise your poultry for. There's also many other reasons that today folks get poultry. They're a great starter project for the young kids for a 4-H or FFA project. Companionship. Pets. A lot of people just like to get 1 or 2 chickens just to have them as a pet. They do have great personalities. There are certain things that we need to keep in mind with our chickens to keep them productive and healthy throughout their lives. Okay, chicken digestive system. I'm really not going to go into this too much in depth, but there's one thing to really keep in mind. Obviously we know chickens don't have teeth. So how do they process their food? There's a little organ inside the chicken called the gizzard. The gizzard is basically the teeth of the chicken, and this would be where what we call the grit is deposited. We will talk a little bit more about this later, but very, very important for the chicken to have grit. Unless they're confined 24 hours a day, like some commercial chickens are, and their only diet is commercial feed, they can break commercial feed down, the pellet or the crumble, without having grit available to them. But obviously, the way we are raising our chickens for the most part are not how some of the commercial chickens are raised. So they're going to eat bugs, they're going to eat mealworms, they're going to eat hen scratch, they're going to eat other types of things. Where it's very, very important for the proper gizzard function and digestion of the food to have grit available to your chickens. What the gizzard is, it's a muscle. And so it's constantly moving around, and that grit inside there, as that muscle is contracting, helps break down the large particle of food. So to get started, housing, we need certain square footage depending on the size or the number of birds that we have, a high quality feed, clean fresh water at all times. Predator control is very, very important. Most of the predators that are going to come after your chickens we have in our area out west here. Some of them fly, some of them are 4-legged on the ground, so we need to be concerned with all of them. Every year that I do these meetings live, inevitably I have folks in the audience say, hey, we've been raising chickens for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, never had issues with predators. This year in 48 hours, every one of our chickens were taken by predators. So very, very important to keep in mind whether you're refurbishing an old garden shed or building your chicken housing from scratch, predator control should be first and foremost in your mind. There are a lot of veterinarians now in every area that I know of that will work on your chickens at home or take the chickens into the vet office. But there are vets in every area now that will help you with your chicken health issues. It's going to take a little bit of daily time. The most time-consuming part is going to be when you're first raising the baby chickens, and then also obviously getting them ready and getting their permanent housing ready for them. I'd say on average though, once everything's going good, 10-15 minutes a day on average is about the amount of time that you're going to spend with your chickens. So, how much square footage do you need per bird? 10 square feet approximately in the adult housing in your coop. So 2 to 3 square foot of that would be in the coop itself. We don't need as much square footage in there because they're going to be primarily in there at night roosting. sleeping, resting at night. And then we need at least about 7 to 8 square feet in their run, which is going to be the outside portion of the permanent housing. And so, 4 birds, how many square feet? 8 to 12 square feet in the coop, 28 to 32 square feet in the run area. Now, a lot of this information is in this poultry guide here, your first year with chickens. It should be available at most, if not all, the Grange locations also. So, who called the poo-poo? We need to check our ordinances. Every town in Oregon that I'm aware of does allow chickens inside the city limits. No roosters ever, but we don't need roosters for the egg laying portion of it. But each city or town has different regulation on the amount of female laying hens that you can have in town. So just check with the local Grange Co-op employee. They should know. If not, you can call City Hall and find out what your local regulations are. Of course, if we live outside the city limits, the sky's the limit. You can have as many chickens as you want. The basics. The brooder is their first home. I refer to it as the chick nursery. Certain types of bedding are good. Certain types of bedding we want to stay away from. We need correct temperature, correct feed for the correct situation. Like I said, clean, fresh water at all times. Security, meaning security from maybe the house cat, the dogs, things like that. They're very young, baby animals at this point in time. Been under a lot of stress, so we want to make sure we take proper care of them. And airflow. So this is kind of the visual picture we want of your chick nursery or the brooder. The only thing, honestly, I do not like about this picture that I will point out is if you look at the brooder, it looks like it's corrugated cardboard. Please stay away from that. Every year, inevitably, somewhere in my area, I hear of a fire, a shed burning down, a garage burning down, a house burning down. And that's because we've got a 250 watt heat bulb in here, which Janessa will go into in a little further detail here in a minute. But so there's a lot of heat down inside there, and obviously the cardboard can catch fire. So think about safety during this point in time also. But like I said, this is kind of the visual we want. We've got plenty of feed, plenty of water in there for the babies. They're all kind of spread out. If we could hear the noise, they're probably just nice, peaceful little chirps going on at this point in time. So this is what we want to see from your brooder or chick nursery. Temperature, very, very important. A few folks are not aware of how the Grange Co-op receives their chicken. It's through the United States Postal Service. Most of them are coming from out of state, so they are hatched in Texas or Ohio or New Mexico. I'm not sure which hatchery the Grange uses. So they are hatched, they are vaccinated for what's called Marek's disease. They are put in these cardboard boxes, put on an airplane, and come to Oregon or California, in case of the Yuba City store. And then the post office calls the Grange and says, hey, can you come down and get these chirping little chickens from us? So they come to the store. So they've been through a lot of stress in the first couple, 3 days of their life. So it's important for you guys to follow some of these basic rules before we take the chickens home to make sure that they've been under a lot of this stress, to make sure we get them off to a healthy, happy start when you get them to their permanent home. First week, we want the temperature down at baby chick level to be 90 to 95 degrees. Then each week after that, we lower the temperature by about 5 degrees. They're going to be ready to go into their permanent housing, the coop, at about 6 to 8 weeks of age. Now, in our country where it can still be a little bit cool, we can have some nights down close to freezing into maybe even April. We may want to keep them in the brooder a little bit longer or have an additional heat source in that coop if the nightly temperatures are still dropping down close to freezing. But you guys will be decide on that based on when you get your baby chickens from the co-op. So there's different types of heat sources we can get, but there again, I'll let Vanessa talk a little bit more about these different heat sources here in a minute. So, what will you need your brooder? Quart size feeder and water, bedding, vitamins, electrolytes, probiotics, brooder's lamp, brooder thermometer, and a brooder bowl. And at this point, I will turn it over to Janessa to explain these items in a little further detail.
So when you're looking to start out on your chicks when you get them, there's a variety of different products that you can get at the co-op. We've got, you would want a feeder and a waterer, small size, quart size. To start off with, they do not need a super large one. You got to remember how little they are, and they've got to be able to get in there. Sometimes what I've done too is put a piece of wood or something on underneath, or piece of brick to hold that up higher so that they're not climbing into it and splattering it everywhere, because they will start doing that. You can also, these are some newer ones that Grange has, some different little poultry waterers and feeders, and they go up in size as you want to do that. They also have a beginner poultry kit that includes intro about it. It has the reflector and the lamp. Has a little feeder and waterer for you to get started if you don't want to have to buy everything, you know, and I can't remember what she said to get and whatnot. Most of the Grange employees, though, have a really good knowledge of all this and know exactly what they need to get. Your heat lamp, you want to get a red heat lamp, not the white, the clear. The red is a little softer to them. It does radiate heat, but yet it helps them so it's not so bright. They can actually fall asleep and rest and be good. And make sure on your brooder reflector that you have a ceramic inlet, whatnot. It helps to protect and keep from preventing fires. We also have thermometers that you can use an incubator thermometer, or you can use just a regular. What I did is I just had an outside thermometer that I did temperature thing, put it at the very bottom of the brooder, and that way you can see what the temperature is, because you got to remember the chickies are nice and little, so you got to know what the temperature is down by them, not up at the top. So that's why you put it up high and put it down low, and go up as we go as the chickens get bigger. Something you can do when you're thinking of making your brooder, I used a water trough, and I used a small one at first, and then I built up to the bigger one. I did also get some, I had some different chicken wire, really small round one that I put over the top, because I do have kitties at home, and I did not want the kitties to get in there, and so I just covered the whole top, which was really easy to do, and my daughter was able to get into it and be able to help feed and everything, so it wasn't a problem. Trying to think. Also, when you're looking at the brooder and you're watching the chickies, you got to make sure it's not too hot or too cold for them. So if they're all sitting right in the middle, right under the heat lamp, it's too cold. If they're nice and spread out and even, then you're just right. If they're way off all the way around the outside or way off to one side or whatnot, it's too hot. Or there might be a draft that's going on that they're always moving to that side because this side is too cold. So something to keep in mind for that. You also want to start them off with a electrolyte and probiotics. There's a couple varieties. They have this one here, Chick Boost. They use this in their at the store right now. So if you see the water's a little bit looking Gatorade, looks like Gatorade, that's the Chick Boost in there. This is really good. One of these bags should last you the whole duration of, I had 4 chickies and I used this and never had to get another one for about 8 weeks. So it's 1 scoop for every gallon. But this will really help keep them from getting what we call poopy butt. But they can get sick and have some issues. Again, like Greg said, they're being flown in, they're being stressed out. Really being proactive in giving the probiotics to them and prebiotics, vitamins, minerals, it helps really keep them healthy. Another brand that they have is these different ones here. They have single ones of Durastat and vitamins and electrolytes, probiotics here. Or you can get the bottles that actually have the tablets, or have the, powder in them, and you can do that. And that's actually what I do with my adult chickens now, is I put the Durastat in their water to help keep them healthy through the day. On this slide here, you'll see the different products that you can get as far as feeders, waters, just some examples. I did, again, we brought in stuff from the stores of what they stock, so it makes it nicer so you can actually get an actual visual of everything that they need. Something I didn't talk about before, the poultry spray here. This would be an all-natural used with essential oils that you would use for, I always look at it, mites, fleas, ticks, and bed bugs, chickens, ducks, turkeys, non-toxic. You'd want to use this more on the adult birds, because adult birds are going to probably have more of that once they start feathering, as far as getting some ear mites. And usually this is more towards spring, summertime that you'll start seeing some of that. But that's when you also can use the diatomaceous earth and the dust bath powder. They do need a dust bath as they get older. And you can take and use this, mix it with some sand or peat moss and kind of mix that up, make yourself a little box, and they'll just go in there and you'll see big white clouds everywhere. But that's what they're doing, is getting that on their feathers to help get the mites off. So, and then I do also have the fresh flakes down there. Any type of bedding or shavings or whatever, you can get the big bags or the smaller ones. I personally get the bigger bags because there's more bang for my buck, and I can save it and use it in the coop as they've gotten older or whatnot to be able to do that. So other than that, we will go and move into the different, as they get older, and what we need to do. I'll have Greg come back up.
Thank you, Janessa, for that great information. One thing I do want to stress is on the bedding, we want to stay away from cedar. Cedar is great in dog beds on this side of the mountain to help repel fleas, but there's an actual oil in the cedar that can be toxic to chickens. So we want to stay away from cedar. My preference for bedding would be either pine shavings or the pine bedding pellets. And I believe the Grange in their brooders uses a little pine bedding pellets for their bedding. Either one of those will work fine. We want to stay away from newspaper, straw, things like that. So there again, maybe shop for pine shavings or pine bedding pellets for the bedding in the chick nursery. So, around 6 to 8 weeks, especially if this is our first venture into chickens, they are ready to graduate to their permanent housing, the coop, ready to move out of the brooder. They're going to be fully feathered, and they'll be able to tolerate temperature down into the 40s at this point in time. That's the reason I stress, particularly on my side of the mountain. I live over in Central Oregon, and we can have freezing nights almost any day of the year. So over here, it's a little more temperate climate. So as long as our nighttime temperatures, when they're ready to go to the coop, at that 6 to 8 week period, as long as the temperatures are not dropping below the 40s, we probably do not need any supplemental heat in the coop when we move the birds out. They will be pretty much adult size at 6 to 8 weeks. They're not fully mature yet, but they can tolerate some pretty cool temperatures. There again, just kind of show the birds where the feed and the water are in their new permanent home. And we want to keep the nest boxes closed. They don't need the nest boxes, obviously. They're not going to be laying their first egg until they're between 4 and 5 months old, around 18 weeks of age. So let's keep the nest boxes closed until they're 15 to 16 weeks old. We don't need them at this point in time. So, is the coop empty? There again, like I said earlier, if this is your first venture into chickens, you will not have any current adult birds out in the coop. Because if we do have adult birds out there, we probably want to wait until the chickens are 10 to 12 weeks old, just to let them mature a little bit more before we introduce them to your existing flock of chickens. Now, anytime we introduce new birds into a flock, they're going to have to completely reestablish their pecking order. Even if we introduce just one new bird into a flock of 10, 15, 20 chickens, they're going to completely reestablish their pecking order. So we can have a little bit of a Donnybrook on our hand. There's one trick that works pretty good for if we're going to be increasing the size of our flock or introducing new birds into the flock. What works pretty darn good is one evening when your younger birds are ready to move out there, or before we get to that evening, put some type of barrier in your coop where the chickens can see each other, chicken wire, hardware cloth, whatever, where the two groups of chickens can see each other, but they can't get at each other yet. So one evening when your older chickens are sleeping, go ahead and go in there, put this barrier in place, and introduce your new birds, the younger birds. And then keep that barrier in place for 10 days to 2 weeks. And the same thing after 10 days to 2 weeks, go in there one night when both batches of chickens are sleeping, take the barrier out, put something in there like a big scoop of dirt with worms or something in it, or a flock block works great for this too, but introduce something new into that coop. So the next morning when they wake up, they can get at each other, but they're going to be so interested in this cool new thing you've introduced that we're going to have less of an issue with the chickens fighting with each other. There will be a few issues because they are going to still reestablish that pecking order, but it's going to be a much easier transition if we do something like this when they're reestablishing that order. So, like I mentioned earlier, no matter what type of chickens or poultry we're raising, the management's going to be the same. The temperature, the feeders, the waters, the prebiotics, the probiotics, the electrolytes, and things like that. But there is the difference in nutrition based on what we're getting our birds for. So that's real important for you folks to keep in mind. What is the primary reason you're getting your birds? Is it for egg production? Is it for meat production? Are we going to get true game birds? We're going to get what's called a dual purpose breed. And a lot of the birds that the co-op has are going to be what we call a dual purpose breed, which they're very, very good layers, but you can use them for milk production, or pardon me, meat production also. They're not going to grow as quickly as say a Cornish cross, because if you buy first crest fryers from the store, those are probably what we call a Cornish crossbreed, and they are bred specifically for meat production. They're going to go from a baby chick this big to a 7 to 8 pound fryer in about 6 to 7 weeks. Whereas your dual purpose breeds or your white leghorn type, which are bred specifically for egg production, they're going to, like I said, be much slower to mature. So there again, you have a number of different starter options that we want to make sure we're getting into now. We want to make sure we're getting the correct feed for the correct situation based on nutrition for what we're trying to accomplish. So make sure we get a starter grower product for your baby chicks. We don't want to feed a laying ration to a young growing chicken, because purposely there are very high levels of calcium in your laying rations to make sure we have a good durable eggshell. So if we feed a laying ration to a young growing chick, we can actually cause some bone deformities, some bone issues as they're growing, because they're growing very, very quickly. We don't want that excess calcium. So make sure you're starting on a good quality starter grower diet. Like I said, and we're going to keep them on this until they're 14 to 16 weeks of age. That's when they're going to start laying eggs. My rule of thumb is go ahead and stay on, like I said, your starter grower diet until that first egg hits the ground. Come into the Grange at that point in time and switch over to your laying ration. So we want them to grow nice and slow, strong, and healthy. What we call our Chick Strong system in the Purina starting grows. Slow and steady wins this race. We want proper body development, not too fast, not too slow. We want them to grow just right. A young hen that is going to grow into a laying hen is called a pullet. And so we want those pullets to grow correctly for what we're trying to develop them for. A long, happy, healthy, productive life as a laying hen. All of the Purina starter feeds are 18% crude protein. They contain the necessary nutrients to get your birds off to that good strong start. Feed these from hatch to about 18 weeks, or like I said earlier, when that first egg hits the ground. And at that point in time, we're ready to switch over to their laying ration. All of the premium Purina products, be it the start and grows, the laying rations, they all contain prebiotics, probiotics to help with gut health. Now, to explain briefly the difference between a prebiotic and a probiotic is a living organism. All living creatures, us included, have what we call an internal biome, which is your living organisms inside you. The prebiotic is food for those living organisms. So there again, the pre and probiotics. I'd like to point out too that we use what we call poultry-specific pre and probiotics, which means they are designed exclusively for poultry. They're not designed for cattle or sheep or other types of ruminants. They're developed specifically to benefit the poultry. Okay, I mentioned earlier, we have two different options on the start and grow, medicated or non-medicated. What's the first thing most folks think of when they see the word medication? Probably antibiotic is one of the first things that comes to mind. I like to point out that the medication in the medicated version of start and grow is not an antibiotic. It's called Amprolium. It's specifically what we call a coccidiostat. It's to prevent coccidiosis, which is a microscopic parasite that lives in the soil, and it can live in the soil up to 12 to 15 years, and it's very prevalent in our area. So what I like to point out also is that Amprolium molecule is large enough where it does not even enter the system of the animal. It basically passes on through the digestive system out into the manure, and it does its job internally as it's passing through the digestive system. It naturally kills that cocciparasite, which can be very prevalent in young growing chickens. So there again, all of our feeds are completely natural other than the medicated option on the start and grow. If you want to go with the non-medicated version, I always recommend good cleanliness, but you want to be extra diligent on your husbandry and cleanliness if you're going with the non-medicated version. Because as I mentioned earlier, there's nothing that you can legally go to the co-op and buy that will treat coccidiosis. You may be able to get an off-script prescription from your veterinarian for something, but that is between you and your veterinarian. The first clinical sign of coccidiosis would be normally chicken manure is pretty light in color. if you see your baby chick's manure start getting very, very dark, that could be the first clinical sign that that internal parasite is doing some damage internally to your baby chickens. Also, some hatcheries, I don't know of any feed stores that do this, but some hatcheries do offer vaccination for coccidiosis now. So if you folks are getting your chickens online and paying extra to get the vaccination for coccidiosis, I highly recommend going with the non-medicated version of the Start and Grow at that point in time. Because if you feed a medicated feed with Amprolium to baby chicks that have been vaccinated for coccidiosis, it will cause the vaccination not to work. But if you're getting your baby chicks through the Grange Co-op, they have not been vaccinated, so I would recommend the medicated feed. And just a reminder, it is not an antibiotic, it is a coccidiostat. So, it's kind of a rule of thumb based on the number of birds you're getting and for what purpose. If we're getting future laying hens, the pullets, kind of rule of thumb would be, if you have 5 chicks, they're going to go through approximately 75 pounds until that first egg hits the ground, as an example. If you're doing those Cornish cross, raising them specifically for meat, 5 chicks are going to go through about 50 pounds. They're very voracious eaters. The reason they're going to go through a little less feed is, keep in mind, we're going to keep your pullets, your future laying hens, on this starter feed for about 16 to 18 weeks until that first egg hits the ground. With your Cornish crosses, they're going to grow much quicker, and so they're only going to be on feed for about 6 to 8 weeks. But these are just kind of rules of thumbs, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but it kind of gives you an idea how much feed you're going to need based on the number of baby chicks you take home and for what purpose. So, first egg hits the ground. What do we do then? There again, it's time to decide, and as you can see, we have a number of different laying options within the Purina family and also the Rogue Quality Feed family. So we come down, and I'm just going to throw out some examples here. Say you're going to switch over to the, well, either the Layina Plus or the Rogue Quality Feed. All of our starter and grower feeds are what we call the crumble form, because there's the little babies. It's hard for them to handle a pellet. It's just too big of a particle size for them to eat. So we also have crumble and pellet options in their laying rations. You will have less waste overall if you feed them a pellet. The reason for that is obviously these chicken feeders, chickens do like to kind of scratch around and root around and things like that. So inevitably some of the feed that we're offering them is going to get spilled out onto the ground. With the crumble being a smaller particle size, the chicken is not going to be able to readily identify that on the ground and pick it out and eat it. The pellet's going to be a larger particle size, so more times than not they will pick that up off the ground and eat it. But we need to, chickens are very visual, very behavioral, so we need to teach them and transition them that that pellet is now their feed source. And so what I recommend is, hopefully you have some Start and Grow crumble left when we're ready for the transition stage, but if not, you can do it with the laying ration also, but we want to mix the crumble in with the pellet at about 75% crumble to 25% pellet. And then after 4 or 5 days, make it a 50-50 blend, and then another 4 or 5 days, make it 75 pellet, 25 crumble. And so at that point in time, once we teach that chicken that the pellet is now food, we're fine. I've had a number of people over the years that have been raising chickens for years that say, hey, my chickens won't eat pellets. All they will eat was crumbles. You can have chickens that are 4 or 5 years old. You can teach them to eat a pellet. You just have to do this same process of transitioning them. So it's your choice though. It's the same feed. To make a crumble, they have to make a pellet first, and then it goes through a crumbling machine. So your choice. Now if you are going to get some banties, which a lot of people like to get banties, they're a smaller breed of chicken, but they're pretty cool. A lot of people like those. And you probably want to stay with the crumble if you're going to have an assortment of smaller birds with your bigger birds. Obviously there again within the Layina family, I will point out real quick, we have the regular Layina pellets and crumbles. Been around for years. There again, they all contain those pre and probiotics. They also have what's called marigold extract, which is very beneficial for a natural coloring enhancement, and it also helps the immune system. And we also have what's called the Layina Omega Plus. It's to me one of our best kept secrets. How it is different than the regular quote Layina is, in the regular Layina family, the primary protein source is soybean meal, which is a very good protein source for chickens. But what we have done through our research is, in the Layina Plus, we have replaced the soybean meal with whole ground flax as the main protein source. So we have scientifically proven that we actually increase the omega-3 fatty acid level in an egg by over 300% from chickens fed Leina Plus. Also want to point out that at this point, not all the Grange stores carry the regular Leina and the Leina pellets and crumbles, but all locations do carry the Leina Plus. Another one we have that is one of the newer introductions into the family is called Leina Free Range. Now what makes that a little bit different is we've replaced some of the soybean meal as a protein source in this particular product with actual bug protein. So we're mimicking a free range diet with the full nutritional package in one bag. So that's a pretty new option for us. And there again, you have the road quality feed option of a layer ration, and then they also have their own organic formula if you want to go the organic route. And another thing that is in the Leina family that sets us apart, be it the regular Leina pellets or crumbles, or the Leina Plus, or any of the other layer rations from Purina, is we have what we call the Oyster Strong formulation. We have found through our research that a combination of calcium, which I mentioned earlier is very important for shell durability, but a combination of the calcium source coming from actual oyster shell and calcium carbonate is the best way to go nutritionally. So we actually have incorporated into the Leina family actual ground oyster shell as one of our calcium sources. So most options are available in a pellet or crumble, but I like to point out the Leina Plus and the Free Range are what we call a mini pellet, so it would be good for any breed, any size of chicken. There again, keep in mind, these should only be fed, whether it's the Rogue or the Purina family, should only be fed to laying hens. Too much calcium for your young growing birds. Now down here, there's always a disclaimer. I like to point this out. I always get questions every time I do this live and in person. It says, feed roosters Purina flock raiser. There again, if we're in the city limits, we're not going to have roosters anyway. But if we are out in the country and you want a rooster to be able to maybe fertilize some of your eggs to hatch your own chickens in subsequent years, the reason we say feed your roosters flock raiser is there again because that high calcium level can have detrimental health effects over a long period of time to your roosters. But there again, I say this is a disclaimer because I don't know anybody that separates out their roosters and feeds them a separate diet. Just saying. So the details, there again within the Purina family, they all contain those poultry specific pre and probiotics. The Oyster Strong system where we've actually incorporated ground oyster shell into it. If you buy the Leina pellets, you look real close, you see little white specks in there, and that is actually ground oyster shell. Now, realistically, the way most of you folks are going to be raising your chickens, they're not going to be confined in their coop and their run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A lot of people like to let their chickens out in the backyard or in the pasture for so many hours a day. That's what we call free ranging or partial free ranging. Now, because of that, I do recommend feeding separately grit, which we talked about earlier is very, very important to them. And I also recommend, even though we have oyster shell incorporated into the feed itself, is offer them oyster shell also separately. Okay, there we go. So scratch grains, treats, goodies. I believe Janessa is going to get this a little more detail in a moment, but they love scratch grains. Chickens have a very strong, what we call pecking instinct, so we do need to stimulate that because there again, I mentioned earlier, chickens are very visual. They also are very behavioral, so we do need to stimulate this natural pecking instinct, either through giving them various treats like scratch, mealworms, which are some examples of different chicken treats up here. Mealworms are a very popular treat. What works very good also to stimulate that natural pecking instinct is a product of ours called the Flock Block. It's much more nutritious than scratch itself because scratch is either a 2-grain, 3-grain, or a 5-grain scratch. So think of your scratch or your treats as a chocolate cake and ice cream. It's the dessert. Think of your laying ration, be it the Purina family of Leina or the Rogue Feeds layer rations, that those are your steak, your broccoli, and your green salad. So we want to limit the scratch, the goodies, the worms, those types of things to no more than 10% of the diet. The reason for that is we want to make sure that we control the majority of that diet from a health and productivity standpoint. If you're on a good laying ration, when your birds are between 1 and 3 years of age, they should be laying, if you have, say, as an example, 5 hens, 10 hens, you should be getting 4 to 5 eggs a day. If you're getting less than that, maybe look at your nutrition program. Maybe we're not in balance. Okay, With that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Janessa to talk a little further in detail about some of these tools to stimulate that natural pecking instinct we've talked about.
Some of the items that Grange has in there for your chickens, and remember, these are all treats for your chickens. Do not just feed them on a regular basis. I have a lot of customers that have told me that they're just buying big 5-pound things of mealworms and they just give them tons and tons of mealworms. Well, that's, like you said, candy to the chickens. You really need to make sure they're eating a complete diet, because that's not a complete diet. They're going to be missing out on their vitamins and minerals and all the other stuff that they need. So one of the things, as a very beginning, you could also use a chick stick, they call this. This is for your younger animals to kind of keep them going and just kind of get them used to pecking at some different things and trying different things out. They have a variety of different treat squares, and you can use they have a wire box that you would put these in. If you don't want to get just a specific one of that, you can use a suet box as well and hang that in there. My chickens, I have 4 Buff Orpingtons, maybe like a day, and this is gone. I do like the flock block. I use that on mine, and it takes them a little while to maybe week or so, 10 days. But it does give them something to do and do that. I do also give them scratch. Once a day I'll do like a cup full of scratch and just throw it over there just to give them something. But if they've got that flock block in there, they don't even want to touch the scratch. There's all different types of different mealworm and blends that a lot of companies are doing. Bug Bonanza is another one that's a very good top seller. It's all different types of bugs in there, and I know people think, ew, but that's what chickens love. Speaking of that, also a toy, having some type of little fun toy. So you put the little, feed inside these, and as it pecks, it starts breaking up and opening up, and they get little toys. So it gives them some interaction to do. Same thing with the treat tumbler. You put mealworms in there. As they peck at it and rolls, the mealworms come out. So kind of training them like the dog sometimes, but they will go after it and do a really, it just keeps them going. Mine do actually stay in a coop and a run. They don't go out of everything, because I've got a nice hawk that flies over our area quite often. So I like to give them little fun things to do. So other than that, I think that's the main gist of just the treats, just reminding people that they are a treat. So I'll give this back to Greg.
So, we want our chickens to live a happy, healthy, long, productive life. Your chickens have an average lifespan of somewhere between 10 and 14 years. Their productive life is going to be somewhere between 3 and 5 years. By productive life, we mean as far as laying a lot of eggs on a daily basis. The reason we say 3 to 5 years is all birds naturally in the fall, when the days get shorter, go into what we call the molting stage. It's kind of a rest period for the chickens. What triggers that there again is the days getting shorter. A laying hen needs somewhere between 14 and 16 hours of light, not necessarily daylight, it can be artificial light. They need between 14 and 16 hours of light per day to keep laying consistently year round. Now a hen, baby hen, pullet, when she is first hatched, is predetermined how many eggs she's going to lay over the course of her entire life. So if we put that artificial light source in there, say the middle of August, have it come on at 4:30 in the morning on a timer and off at 9, we're going to artificially extend that daylight hours to between that 14 and 16 hours. So if we do that, we're going to keep the chickens from going into molt, and they're going to lay pretty consistently for 3 to 4 years. Now if we allow them to go into that molt, which I consider is completely natural, sometime during the fall or early winter, they're going to slow down on laying eggs. Sometimes they will quit laying eggs completely. Sometimes they will lose a few feathers. Sometimes they will lose most of their feathers and not look really nice for a while. And the molt can take up to a couple, 2.5 months for them to naturally come out of it. Now another little trick on this, if we do want to give them that rest period, which works pretty good, is there again about mid-August, go ahead and put an artificial light source in the coop. Have it come on at 4:30 in the morning and off about 9, because by then it's light enough even in the winter time to have that have that light that we need. But then say the 1st of December, turn off that artificial light. We're gonna trigger very, very quickly that natural molting stage for them. And then keep that light off for about 2 weeks. Then put the light back on. They're still gonna go into a molt, but it's gonna be a much shorter duration and it's not gonna be as severe. So it's up to you on if you want consistent egg laying year round, or if you wanna allow them to go into a natural molt, or if you wanna put them into that third option, what we call kind of a forced molt. So totally up to you, how do you work this? And that's the reason I said, so over the course of that life, if their chickens go into molt, they're not gonna lay any more eggs over the course of their life. It's just gonna extend their productive life out some. Predators, we talked about that earlier. When you're repurposing the shed or building from the ground up, think predator control. My rule of thumb is too, especially on that run, which is gonna be their outside daylight area, is what I like, number one, we wanna stay away from poultry wire. Even 1-inch poultry wire is large enough for some of these predators, like fox raccoons, to stick their wiggly little paws through those openings, and chickens, being very curious by nature, are gonna come over and investigate, what's that cool little wiggly thing? Unfortunately, that predator is gonna grab hold of whatever piece of that chicken it can get, and it's not a pretty sight. So what I recommend for the sides of your run is either hardware cloth or 1/2x1 welded wire. But as Janessa said, some of these predators are flying predators, hawks, eagles, owls. So we do want to have some type of covering over the top of your run. I'm fine with poultry netting up top or a shade cloth, something like that, but to keep these flying predators away from your chickens also. But on the perimeter, go with hardware cloth or 1/2x1 welded wire. Another little tidbit I recommend is on this run is dig a trench on your perimeter. Dig a trench 6 to 8 inches down and out 6 to 8 inches, and bring your perimeter wire down and out, and then bury that. Some of these predators will try to dig, but they're not smart enough. They hit wire when they go straight down. They're not smart enough to back up a foot or 18 inches and dig underneath. So there's a couple of little tidbits or rules of thumb there. Most of these predators are going to be more nocturnal, so I guess you'd say your main concern times would be early in the morning or into the evening time, most of these predators. But some of them will be out during the daylight hours, especially some of your flying predators. So keep that in mind when you're designing your coop, your permanent housing for them. So a few things we need to think about on the disease side, and I'm going to turn this back to Janessa in a moment, but one thing I will mention is avian flu. It's here to stay, unfortunately, in the country. We've had a couple of outbreaks in years past. In Western Oregon with avian flu, it's carried by wild waterfowl. There was a large outbreak in the Midwest a few years ago where they unfortunately had to sacrifice millions and millions of birds. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our domestic poultry away from wild waterfowl. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Janessa.
So as far as staying disease-free, you gotta also make sure you're disinfecting your equipment at all times. What I did when I first got my chickens, a place that we moved into had a coop there, and I didn't know what was in there. So I went through and you can use just bleach, part bleach, 9 parts water. There are some commercial products out there that are like coop cleaners and whatnot. You want to spray that all down, disinfect it, make sure there's nothing there prior to putting your new birds in there. And keeping it clean is same thing as every time I clean the sawdust or the dust out inside my coop. I make sure to kind of wipe it down and make sure everything's clean just for sanitary reasons. Of course, making sure you're washing your hands and whatnot when you're handling your birds, no matter what. Even the little birds, I always had a hand sanitizer in there because they can, your little kids are grabbing those and touching those, that's stuff that can go on their hands, and they're sitting there putting stuff in their mouth. So make sure you're cleaning your hands and clothes and such while you're doing those. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this, back in 2017, all water-soluble antibiotics were taken off of over-the-counter, and you have to get a script for them now at the veterinarian. That's why Greg is talking about having a veterinarian, and there are a lot more veterinarians around here now that are looking and discussing chicken health with the backyard producer. But you got to make sure you have that relationship, because you're not going to be able to go into the store and look for some oxytetracycline or whatnot that used to be you'd be able to use for any of your antibiotic control or, health of the animals. So we want to try to be proactive instead of reactive, and that's where we need to make sure we look at some of these all-natural alternatives to keep your animals healthy, because otherwise you get to take your chicken to the vet and see what's going on. And I'm not sure, I've not been to the vet for a while now as far as how much they charge, but you're gonna have a fee, or if they're gonna come out and see them, 1 chicken, 10 chickens, they're still gonna, you're gonna have to have that. They are taking, in 2023, there will be other antibiotics that will be going away nationwide. That might happen sooner, so that's even more reason why we need to look at some different all-natural alternatives. So when we talk about antibiotic compounds, all natural, there's a listing there of the different herbs and such that are in there that also help to inhibit the bad growth and help to stimulate good growth of the good bacteria to grow. So that's kind of why they have the marigold in their feeds. We also have, like I said, Durastat with oregano. Oregano, if you watch the Purdue Farms natural commercials, they say that they feed oregano to their chickens. Well, that's helping to keep them healthy in that all natural organic type sense. Again, being better to be healthy all the way through life than having them go down and then having to get them back up. You're going to lose egg production, you're going to lose growth, and you might lose your whole flock. Who knows? It depends on how what ends up happening to them as far as what they've got. So these are some of the other ones, prebiotics and probiotics. Like he said, a prebiotic is the feed to feed the good bugs, and a probiotic is a type of good bug. So all these products here, your chick boost, and you can switch to a hen boost as the ones they've become, a laying hen. This just has a little bit different formulation that is for the adult bird versus the chick boost for your small bird. They also have a layer boost in the Duravet line, and the probiotics and vitamins, these you would just kind of feed all separately. You can buy the little packets, or you can buy the bottle, like I said, depending on how they are. We're talking about some of the other ones they have. VetRx, you will see out there, that is a poultry aid to help for like kind of what we call runny noses. So everybody, oh my chicken's got a runny nose. Different types of worms and such. So that is a product that is available over the counter. Pick No More, this would be like for what Greg was talking about when you introduce the birds against each other kind of thing. Sometimes they start getting cannibalistic and they start pecking at each other. Once you see some red, you really need to make sure to get that cleaned up, take that animal out of there, kind of get it all cleaned up with no red, because they will keep going after that animal. And sometimes you end up having to separate it, but hopefully between Levetris and Poultry Care and the Pick No More, Hen Healer or Blue Coat, any of that stuff to kind of hide that red will help. Strike 3 is an all-natural poultry pellet that has pumpkin seed, oregano, and garlic in there. This is just an all-natural digestive aid to help with kind of getting all the parasites and such out. It kind of, the pumpkin helps to naturally helps get rid of worms. So we can't necessarily, it doesn't have any antibiotic in there or any medication in there. It is all natural, but that is a good way. You can also use DE, diatomaceous earth, to help for deworming if you think you need to have that. So one of the other options you also have for some of these all-natural alternatives, the brand new product called Starbar Red Vival that will be coming to Grange very soon. This is from the makers of Red Cell. So if you're familiar with the Red Cell product in horses, they've developed one for chickens. So what makes this a little bit different is this works with the blood system as far as making the blood and your circulatory system healthy and going good. So it works with the blood cells, of course, why it's called red. Making more red cells than having and getting rid of all the white cells that are going to cause like the disease. So that's something also to look out for. It does have a place for it along with all the others, so it just works a little different way. Okay, so Greg's going to go into a little bit more on egg production and what to expect.
Thank you, Janessa. Yes, I just want to reiterate there again, as Janessa was talking about the health of the birds, the better nutrition we give our birds over the course of their life, they're going to be more productive and they're also going to be healthier. So like I said there again, we want to limit the amount of treats that we're offering them every day. And also I see too many times that somebody will come into the feed store and they will buy a bag of scratch and a bag of Leina or Lane ration, mix them together 50-50 and put them in their self-feeder. We are cutting down on the good nutrition. Kelly said the better nutrition we offer our birds or any animal that we're raising is no different than us. The better nutrition we get, the stronger our immune system is going to be, the less chance of getting diseases or illnesses, in this case in our birds. So like I've already mentioned, they're going to start laying their eggs around 18 to 20 weeks of age, maybe a little bit later in some breeds. And particularly ducks. Ducks are not going to lay quite as quickly as chickens will. So just wait, like I said, keep them on their growing diet until that first egg hits the ground, then we're going to switch over to our laying ration, whatever that may be. Said the productive life is going to be 3 to 5 years. We've already talked about molting and things like that, so we don't need to cover that again. But keep in mind, what are we going to do? These birds are going to live 8 to 12 years, and their productive life is going to be closer to 3 to 5. So we have a couple of options. We can either do the old fryer adage, put them in the freezer, the old steamer hens as we call them, or a lot of people honestly just like to let them live out their life naturally on a place, and that's completely fine. Once they are done laying, because they can sporadically continue to lay eggs for 7, 8, sometimes 9 years, but they're going to really slow down and it's going to be real sporadic. But if we want to separate out our hens, because once they quit laying, they're not going to need that high calcium level because we're not too concerned about the durability of the eggshells anymore because they're not laying. If we want to separate them out, we could feed those retired hens a different diet. I would probably recommend our flock raiser. It's kind of an all-purpose poultry feed. Just because it's going to be lower in calcium, but it's still going to have all those other goodies in it, all those essential nutrients that bird is going to need. The oldest bird on record was a bird named Muffy. Muffy lived to be 22 years old. So some chickens live a long, long time, so it's something to keep in mind. So starting other poultry. Now let me back up just a moment there again. If we're going to feed, if we're going to buy meat bird specific, probably going to be a Cornish cross or something like that. If we wanted to raise them specifically for meat, we don't want to feed the start and grow because these birds grow very, very quickly. They're going to grow, like I mentioned earlier, from baby chick size to a 7 to 8 pound fryer in about 6 to 7 weeks. So we need a much higher level of protein than we do for our future girls that are going to lay eggs for us. And so what I recommend in this case is the flock raiser for your meat birds. It's 20% protein instead of 18, so it's going to support that very quick structural and muscle growth on the bird. It's got all the same nutrition that all of our other products has. It has the pre and probiotics, it has the marigold extract. It just doesn't have that high calcium level. We don't need to be concerned about that because we're growing meat birds and not future laying hens. So if we're going to raise meat bird specific, we want to go with the flock raiser, or in the Road brand, they have a broiler starter finisher also. So a couple of options there. We're looking at turkey poults. Baby turkeys or what I call a true game bird, pheasant, quail, those types of things, they have a much higher protein requirement when they're young versus some of these other fowl that we're talking about. So if we're going to raise the baby turkeys, we want to go with Game Bird Startina, which is a 30% crude protein from day 1 to about 8 weeks of age. And then we can switch those baby turkeys over to flock raiser until they're ready to go into the freezer for Thanksgiving. It's not medicated. And also another thing to keep in mind that turkeys are not the smartest bird in the barnyard. So we actually need to kind of teach them how to eat and drink. So I would recommend, if you're going to take home some baby turkeys from the Grange, is to, when you get them home, kind of take their little beaks and gently put their beaks into the feed and the water, just so they kind of know where it is. We kind of teach them to eat and drink. Ducklings and ducks. There again, They're getting more and more popular. I didn't realize this until fairly recently myself, why there's been a surge in the popularity of backyard ducks. Well, I always knew duck eggs were richer, but I didn't, I guess, think about it too in depth. But a lot of people that bake love to use duck eggs because being a richer flavor, they make whatever you're baking taste richer also. And they also, for whatever scientific reason I don't understand, is if you're a baker, they also make the rising process even more pronounced. So there again, management-wise, whether we're doing true game birds, turkeys, ducks, meat birds, whatever the case may be, the management's all the same. The temperature each week, the types of equipment we're going to use, that's all the same. But the nutrition is a little bit different. So if we're going to do ducks or ducklings raised by themselves, we have a Purina duck pellet that you can use from day one all the way through. If we have a mixed flock, we're going to do chickens and ducks, which a lot of people do. I would recommend there again going with the start and grow for all of them. And then you can either do Laena or you can do flock raiser, either one, when they're adults. I prefer probably in this case the Laena, just because of that higher calcium level is going to be very beneficial, not only for the durability of the chicken eggs, but also the duck eggs. And if we're going to raise a true game bird, we want to go with the Game Bird Startina, and we have a full family of game bird products from flight conditioner to maintenance and things like that that you could get available through the Grange also if you're looking at more of a true game bird. So this is kind of the end game. There again, we want this to be fun. I know we've covered a lot of information today, but it's just like any new endeavor that people are trying. Hopefully we're giving you some valuable information to help you prepare, whether you're getting back into chickens after not doing them for a number of years, or if you're brand new to raising chickens. Like I said, hopefully we're giving you a lot of good information that you can use, because we want it to be enjoyable, right? And so we want to raise some happy, healthy, productive animals and enjoy the fruits of our labor. So to wrap things up, again, I want to thank the Grange very much for having us come in and do this for you folks. I want to thank Janessa from VSI. And I want to thank you folks for sitting in on this today. We have a number of different resources. Like I said, I did show you the one brochure, My First Year with Chickens. This is available at most, if not all, of the Grange locations. We have one for first egg to retirement, so that's kind of takes you on beyond when the chickens start laying their eggs in the subsequent years. And then we have a backyard flock product guide for all of the premium Purina products. And we also have, and I apologize, I didn't bring one with me today, but we also have a raised backyard duck brochure that's fairly new that I do have available through the Grange locations also. And as you can see up here, you have a lot of good resources. You can come to the local Grange location. They have very knowledgeable employees that you can ask questions to. As you can see, there's a number of different places that we have available on various social media platforms also. You can join our Purina Poultry Club, or the kids can, or adults, either one. So without further ado, I want to thank you folks for your time. And again, thank the Grange and Janessa. And let's have fun with our chicks.